Arsenal are standing on the brink of history. But the reason this moment feels so big is not just because of the trophies that are still available, but it's because the club has spent years trying to escape a particular version of itself. A version where for Arsenal, top four was success. A version where consecutively finishing third and going for the title wasn't pain, it was unimaginable. And a version where people didn't just say that Arsenal lacked quality, they lacked character, leadership, strength, and a proper spine. And that's why this current Arsenal team feels different because Mikel Arteta hasn't just rebuilt the squad. He hasn't just changed the tactics. He has changed the standards. And in this video, I want to look at how Arsenal went from a club that was being mocked for celebrating Champions League qualification to now being a club where finishing second feels like failure. Now, to fully understand where Arsenal are right now, we need to take a trip down memory lane to understand back then what the debate around Arsenal was. Because for a period of time, the debate around Arsenal wasn't, are they good enough to finally win the Premier League? Can they win the Champions League? Instead, it was, is finishing third or fourth good enough for Arsenal? Is that a campaign that you can say was a success? Back in 2015, Sky Sports literally published a piece asking where 10 years of third and fourth finishes represented failure or success for Arsenal. And that alone tells you so much about where the club's standards had drifted. Sky Sports framed that era as a debate between people who saw Arsenal's consistency as impressive and people who saw it as an underachievement. And I want to be very, very clear here. I am not disrespecting what Arsene Wenger has done for his club in any way, shape, or form. Arsene Wenger is one of the most important figures, not only in Arsenal history, but also in English football history. He changed the club. He changed English football for the better. He gave Arsenal the Invincibles, legendary players, iconic attacking football, and Champions League consistency, even whilst they were fighting debt. However, over time, because of the Emirates move, financial restrictions, Chelsea spending, City spending, even Liverpool spending, the ambitions changed. Top four no longer started to feel like the platform. It started to feel like the destination. And that is the key difference between then and now. Because this Arsenal fan base never stopped wanting titles. But after so many years of not being involved in the title race and it sounding like a pipe dream, the expectations were conditioned downwards. And going back to that 2015 piece by Sky Sports, pundit Charlie Nicholas said something that feels relevant even now. He said, you need to build a mentality of winning which isn't really there. And that is such an important line for everything I'm going to say in this video. Because the criticism around Arsenal's mentality, it didn't start with Arteta, it didn't start with Emery, it was something there even in the Wenger days. And unfortunately was a reputation that Arsenal had been building for years on end. Now Sky's article also described the criticism of Arsenal at the time as being that they were a soft touch, psychologically weak, predictable, and tactical naive. Now, as harsh as that was the label around Arsenal. And the problem with labels in football is that they stick. You don't just remove them with words and press conferences, you remove them with evidence. Now, this isn't me saying that the media are against Arsenal, because even within the fan base, the same feeling was there. In 2019, an Arsenal blog called Just Arsenal posted an article titled, "Finishing top four should not be the target for Arsenal." The article said that a lot of the conversation was around whether Arsenal could finish in top four or finish above Tottenham, but very few were predicting Arsenal to challenge for the title. And the conclusion was simple: finishing top four should not be the target. The target should be winning the Premier League. Now, whether you agreed with every word or not, the point was definitely right. For a club the size and stretch of Arsenal, Champions League qualification should never be the target. It should be the bare minimum that Arsenal and their fans should expect at the end of the season. But by that point, Arsenal had gone so long without properly challenging for the title that any ambition to even win it sounded completely unrealistic. And that's what Arteta has come in and now seen that he's changed. Not just the league position, not just the quality of the squad, but the entire belief around both the fan base and the team. But by the end of Wenger's tenure at the club, the criticism had gone long beyond Arsenal's league positions. It now became a question about the identity of the club. A club that had once gone invincible and was known for competing in the highest level of football. And back then, Arsenal did not just lose games. We lost big games in ways that fed into every single stereotype and every single label that people gave us. One of the clearest examples of that, losing 4-0 away to Liverpool back in 2017. The Guardian described Arsenal as lurching towards another familiar crisis and said the whole thing felt predictable. It also pointed out that these kind of routes no longer felt shocking to Arsenal fans. And that's when you know a narrative had hardened. When people are no longer surprised by the collapse, by atrocious performances, they expect it. That was the danger for Arsenal, and that was the environment and the direction that Arsenal were heading in at the time. Soft centre, no spine in the team, no leadership, absolutely no control when it came to hostile environments. The same conversations, the same questions, and even deeper, the same wounds. And unfortunately, even the data looks into that. From 2017 into 2018, Arsenal conceded 51 league goals in back-to-back seasons. That is not title winning control or even title competing control. That is not a defensive base of an elite team. So when you combine those numbers with the manner at which Arsenal were losing at that time, you can understand why that narrative would stick. Now, was it always fair? No. Was it sometimes lazy? Definitely. But did Arsenal give people enough evidence to go against it? Unfortunately, no. And this is where we fast forward from Wenger onto Unai Emery. And in some ways, this is where the gap between Arsenal's name and Arsenal's reality grew increasingly uncomfortable. Because Arsenal still had big players. You had the likes of Aubameyang, Lacazette, Ozil, Xhaka, David Luiz, and a young Bukayo Saka coming through. But structurally, emotionally, defensively, Arsenal never felt stable. And if you look at this graphic from Sky Sports at the time, you can see just that. Premier League away record under Unai Emery. In 24 games, we had lost 10, drawn 6 and won 8. And in space of 24 games, only kept 2 clean sheets. That is almost like playing the majority of a season with only getting 2 clean sheets. With the current setup at Arsenal right now, I can't even imagine that. But that was a massive problem. Because away from your home stadium, you find out a lot about the character behind the team. Can you suffer? Can you win ugly? Can you control games? Can you cope in hostile environments? Now, after an abysmal loss away to Sheffield United, losing the game 1-0, Patrice Evra went on Sky Sports and said this. He had criticised Arsenal's weak mentality and labelled them babies. He said they looked pretty, but not like a winning team. And he questioned the leadership, character, and personality in the side. Now again, you can say the wording was harsh. It was definitely disrespectful. But was it wrong? And the important thing to remember here was that these were the exact narratives week in, week out that Arsenal are fighting against. It's not just from rival fans, it's from pundits, it's from former players. Any sort of journalist at the time was saying the exact same things about Arsenal. In the wider football culture, Arsenal was seen as a team that likes attacking football, but were very fragile. Technical, but soft. Nice to watch, but easy to bully. And what made it even more interesting was Granit Xhaka's response to all of that. Xhaka pushed back and said, Arsenal had to stop talking about mental strength as an excuse and had to show character whether they are home or away. He also said the group had to work internally and not listen to any outside noise. And I actually think that moment was really important for Arsenal. I want to even say pivotal. And that's mainly because Xhaka was saying, look, enough talking, we need to fix this internally. But unfortunately, the results at the time weren't showing any signs that people should actually believe what Xhaka's saying. People shouldn't believe that Arsenal are blocking out the noise and trying to work on it. And that's because you can't argue your way out of a reputation. In football, you have to play your way out of it. And then we get to 2020, which is in the first year of the Arteta era, but arguably one of Arsenal's lowest ever points I think I've ever seen. Arsenal were in dreadful form. The team looked flat, the football was heavy, and confidence was absolutely gone. And after losing to Burnley, Gabriel Magalhaes tweeted this. Sorry fans, we will get out of this situation. We need you. And this is around the exact time that Saka tweeted that iconic tweet, Arsenal fans, you deserve so much more. And that tweet is such a time capsule because when you look at Gabriel and Saka now, they are the heart and soul of this Arsenal team. Gabriel in particular, aggressive, dominant, emotional, a leader, and a defender who actually enjoys a fight. But at that point, they were part of a team that was just trying to survive the storm. And that's because Arteta did not inherit a team that was 1 or 2 tweaks away from challenging for the title. He inherited a squad with tactical issues, recruitment and confidence issues, not to mention a reputational problem too. So before Arsenal could even become great again, they had to become hard to play against again. Now we fast forward a season later and Arteta had already started the rebuild, but the same old narrative and labels were still there. Opening day of the 21-22 season, Brentford away. We all remember this one. Losing to Brentford, who have just played their first ever Premier League game. Jamie Carragher after the game says this on Sky Sports. It's just Arsenal. Weak. Bullied. Men against boys again. New season, same old story. That one line was basically the old Arsenal stereotype in its purest form. 6 years later. And at the time, I have to admit, it was painful because it did seem like nothing had really changed. A new season, but the same Arsenal. the same questions, and the same doubts. But in hindsight, that moment now feels like one of the last final public embarrassments that Arsenal had to go through before the real transformation was visible. And after that, Arsenal added the right players. They added spine. And honestly, that is why the rebuild worked. And now going back to the data, this is where we start to see the story completely flip. Arsenal's goals conceded per game fell from 1.34 in both the 17-18 and 18-19 season to just 0.76 in the 23-24. And this season, it currently sits at around 0.72 after 36 league games. That is not a small improvement. That is a complete shift in identity. And if we go even further and look at the underlying numbers, it tells the same story. In 23-24, Arsenal conceded only 29 league goals, kept 18 clean sheets, and according to Opta, their 28.4 XG conceded was the lowest of any team in Europe's top 5 leagues that season. That is not soft. That is not a team that is weak and bullied. That is control. That is structure. And that is a team who knows how to defend even before the danger becomes obvious. And even if you look at this season, Opta noted Arsenal were allowing just 2.3 shots on target per Premier League game, with no one allowing fewer than their 2.9 per game in the Champions League. Now, yes, we know I love using Opta on this channel, but those stats are massive because that shows you that Arsenal aren't just relying on last-ditch blocks or a great save from the goalkeeper to bail them out. They are preventing the game from becoming chaotic. The old Arsenal used to feel like one transition, one counter-attack could absolutely rip the team open. But this Arsenal squeezes the opposition up the pitch, controls territory, wins the duels, gets physically stuck in, and defensively speaking, is one of the worst teams to play against. And that's the real answer to the old narratives. Not motivational quotes, not a press conference or players lashing back out at pundits, but structure, and most importantly, evidence. And if we fast forward to the present day, this is why Arsenal right now feels so different. Because we are no longer being judged like a team who are trying to get back into the Champions League. We are judged with one of the best teams in world football. Can you win your league title? Can you win the Champions League? In 1920, Arsenal finished with 56 points, 61 in 2021, 69 in 21-22, and then suddenly the jump in 22-23. 84 points, 89 the season after. A lull, yes, in last season with 74, but 3 back-to-back second place finishes nonetheless. And now this season, Arsenal on 79 points with 2 games left, 2 critical games in the title race, at home against Burnley and away against Crystal Palace on the last day. That is the shift. Top 4 used to be argued as success, but second place hurts now. And honestly, the proof of it hurting and it being painful is the proof of progress. The proof that we are going against the grain, going against those narratives where Arsenal used to be weak and bullied. If you look over the last 2 seasons, Arsenal have been ironically criticised because of their strength in set pieces, the fact that they are aggressive, the fact that they are dominant when it comes to free kicks and corners. A label that was definitely foreign to them 10 years prior. But most importantly, when second place feels like failure, it means that standards have returned. It's not arrogance, it's where Arsenal should be. Because this is a club that is judged by trophies, title races, Champions League nights in Emirates, and whether they can stand up to being the best team in Europe. And honestly speaking, I think this is why this quote from Guillem Balaguer is so interesting. He basically argued that progress is uncomfortable and doesn't always move in straight lines, and that Arsenal don't look lost, they look early. That framing matters because outside of England, Arsenal are not viewed as a team as, are they bottoming it again, or are Arsenal a boring team to watch? They are studied as an elite modern day team. And I honestly think that is the tension around Arsenal now. Inside the fan base, myself included, the pressure is there because the time to win is now. But outside looking in, tactically, structurally, even emotionally, Arsenal look like a team that have built something extremely serious. And you know what? Off the back of Chelsea losing in the FA Cup yesterday, I want to bring this stat. Scorecard posted that Arsenal are now unbeaten in 10 games against Chelsea in all competitions. Now, it might sound like a smaller stat to some of the other ones I've used in the video, but trust me, it's important because it says something about Arsenal's new baseline. Previously, Arsenal were going to big games with a sense of doubt. Are we actually going to win, or are we going to experience something painful yet again? However, now Arsenal go into these games expecting to impose themselves upon the opponent, and that is a huge psychological difference. In the Champions League, games against the likes of Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, and even PSG, we are no longer going into these games scared for our lives. We're going into these games expecting to be dominant, expecting to be the Arsenal that we once knew. And don't get me wrong, Arsenal, we are not perfect. We can be frustrated at times. We can be appearing to be a bit lackluster and maybe boring at times. And there are definitely times where we still lack an attacking spark. But the foundation of this team is elite. The mentality in this team is elite. And once those foundations are elite, you're no longer waiting for moments. You are now building sustained dominance. So going back to what I said at the start of the video, when I say Arsenal on the brink of making history, this is not just about the next 3 games. It's about how far the club has come. From top 4 being debated as success, to now having second place as failure. From conceding 50 goals in back-to-back seasons, to now being known for one of the best defenses in European football. From being called weak, bullied, babies, and predictable, to becoming a team that controls games, controls spaces, and competes for the biggest trophies yet again. Wenger kept Arsenal relevant during a very difficult financial era, but Arteta has restored Arsenal's aggression and Arsenal's arrogance to demand Premier League and European success. And that's the difference. Arsenal are no longer proving that we deserve to be in the conversation. We're now proving that we have enough to finish the job. Burnley, Palace, and Budapest. So Arsenal fans and everyone that's watching, I want you to understand that yes, these next 3 games are pivotal. These next 3 games will feel like the pressure is intense. But instead of being afraid of the pressure, I think we should embrace it. I think this team is going to make it over the line. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to smash a massive like and don't forget to hype it up so it finds more Arsenal fans and more football lovers like yourself. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to hit subscribe, to join MB United, and turn on that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload. But just before we go, there's going to be a video popping on the screen right here that I think you're going to enjoy just as much. So until next time, keep it real, and I'll see you when I see you in a bit. Now, as I'm going along in this timeline of Arsenal, feel free to drop your comments down below. What do you remember about Arsenal and how far has this team come? Let's get back to the video.